Church, it's good to be with you today, and I want to take just a moment, and actually I want to invite our ushering team to go ahead and come forward, and they're going to begin to pass the plates this morning. But there's a couple things I just want to highlight for us as a church community as we're going into this next season. You just heard about them briefly, but I want to take a moment and just expound a bit. You heard about 21 days of prayer, and that's going to be coming up starting very, very soon in September. We're going to be launching that with our Thursday prayer gathering. It's going to be a 1-hour prayer service, and again, this is a special time where we're coming together. We have a very, very brief teaching. It's a 1-hour service. We spend some time in worship, individual prayer, communal prayer, and God just always ministers in a very special way. So we're going to have some unique elements in the service that's launching 21 days of prayer, and I want to just empower you to think differently about this. We don't just have 21 days of prayer at the beginning of the year and then in the fall because we don't have anything better to do. Prayer is the lifeblood of connection to God. It's how we live and breathe and find just a daily rhythm of doing not just Sundays with God or not just the morning devotions with God, but every minute of every day with God. So we want to take special care to pay attention to God in unique seasons, and this is one of those. So if you would like to get in on 21 days of prayer, make sure that you are filling out your connection cards so that we can send you the daily focuses, the weekly themes, and we can all as a church partner in this thing together. The second thing I want to highlight is that we have been ramping up towards the launch of our next semester of life groups. That is going to be starting the first full week of September, and I want to just remind you that all throughout the month of August, we have slowly been adding groups to the registration links. So I want to just encourage you, if you're not yet in a group, even in the last few days, we have had new groups sign up, new leaders that have gotten their details in. So head over to the website, hit the group link, and get registered. You were not made to follow Jesus alone. You are made to follow Jesus in community with others. And now, guys, it's my very distinct privilege to introduce our guest speaker for today. And having been a part of First Service already, I can tell you with confidence that you have a word being given today that we get to receive and respond to. It's a powerful word. But Pastor Isaac Hovett is the discipleship pastor at Gettysburg Foursquare, and he brings with him over 2 decades of pastoral experience. He's currently pursuing graduate degrees that are focused on guiding the evangelical church's approach to politics and violence. Isaac also hosts the Jesus and Politics podcast that's found at jesuspolitics.org. Again, I've listened to that. It's wonderful. You should go check it out. But he is dedicated to fostering faith, nonviolence, humility within the church, and while also navigating and being a devoted husband and father to 3. So would you guys welcome Pastor Isaac?
Good morning. It is really good to be here. Pastor Nathan, Dom, it's good to see you. Our church is up in Gettysburg, and here we do quite a bit together, so it's just a privilege. Your pastors, Abe and Stacy, who are on sabbatical, we go way back, and I just want to lend all of my credence and credibility to the fact that you guys have a great church and great pastoral team. Okay. Well, I am from Pennsylvania. It's a ways off. Have you noticed coming into Pennsylvania, they changed the Welcome to Pennsylvania sign? Anybody driven up 15 and seen that? Anybody notice? That's right. Nobody notices because you don't pay attention to us. You're like, we're Maryland. We got it going. They changed the sign. It used to be, Welcome to Pennsylvania, pursue your happiness. Does anybody know what the new slogan is? I don't either. So I'm going to figure it out on my way home. But I thought, all of a sudden I realized that relates. It's a vision statement. Come to Pennsylvania. It used to be, pursue your happiness. Probably I arrived there. I moved there about a year ago, and they were like, okay, we got to change it because it's not happening now. I don't know. Jesus, in the Beatitudes in Matthew 5, is casting his vision statement. Casting these really odd, upside down, different ways of understanding what a flourishing or a good life is all about. And that's what you guys are studying this summer. And Pastor A, before he left, assigned me Matthew 5:5, blessed are the weak or the meek. And we're going to unpack that together. But this is Jesus' vision for what the good life is all about. You guys ready to dive in? Yeah. Okay. We're going to read this verse 5 in 4 different translations, and we'll notice that the key word has been translated 4 different ways. And as you probably are aware, the translators are not one individual who decides how to translate this word, but there's a whole cadre of scholars who are wrestling with how to translate this one word, and they come up with 4 different words. And so we are actually going to unpack 4 different words today because it's that big. Does that sound okay? So I'm getting applause already. That's great. So we'll read through. We'll kind of wrestle with this upside down way of Jesus. It's so different than the vision that is given to us by the world. And then we're going to move into me telling a story that helps us to understand maybe what this is about and what invitation that Jesus might have for us today. And that's what we'll do in our time together. Does that sound okay? You guys okay? All right, let's read these 4 different translations. Matthew 5:5, the NLT says, God blesses those who are humble, for they will inherit the whole earth. The New American Standard, blessed are the gentle, for they shall inherit the earth. The New English Translation, NET, says, blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. And Eugene Peterson's The Message, a paraphrase, he unpacks it, you're blessed when you're content with just who you are, no more, no less. That's the moment you find yourselves proud owners of everything that can't be bought. Jesus cast this vision, and then in chapter 11, Matthew records Jesus inviting us to take it upon ourselves and to live it. He says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle. Interesting, we just read that. I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. Jesus, present at the creation of the world, knows exactly how humans are wired. And he says, follow me into what might feel upside down for you so that you would have rest for your souls. Gentle he is, humble in heart. Did you guys see that Simone Biles and Shaquille O'Neal pic? Did you guys see this? Yeah. Isn't that wild? Like 2 of the great athletes of American history. And these are 2 very different people, right? It's just amazing. You might look at that picture and just think, yeah, she has nothing to offer. She's just weak and small. But then you see her like, and you're just like, whoa, she's like flying like 11 feet through the air. Isn't that crazy? Yeah. I don't know if you guys saw this. This was the next frame, this shot. I got in the middle. I didn't mean to, but I don't even know why I did that. I was just having fun with the slides. Anyway. When we see them together, we might think that she is weak, but she obviously is not. Now, compared to some people, I'm 6'4", 200 and something pounds, somewhere in there. And my wife is 5'3", so compared to her, I'm a giant. Here's a picture of me next to NBA player Luke Jackson, who is here. He's a good friend of mine. We grew up together, same town. This is his house this last summer. And next to him, I'm no giant. I'm 6'4". I think Steph Curry is 6'4". Is that right, Dom? I don't know why I looked at Dom. You've talked basketball before. Yeah, 6'3", 6'4". Like, I would not look, Steph Curry looks tiny on the floor. But it's all relative. What the world thinks is strong is actually weak. And what the world thinks is weak is actually strong. As we begin our talk, these 4 words, gentleness and meekness and humility, contentedness, I want us to have these contrasting images in our mind. In a way, Christians are invited by Jesus into a way that seems really small in the world. But actually, as we take on his vision and live out the Beatitudes, we make a big impact. Our word, humble, gentle, meek, content, these are the postures in which we could be described as blessed. Or others have translated, Jonathan Pennington, a great scholar, described the Beatitudes as these are statements that help us to know when we are postured for flourishing. When we are in a place, not that God is doing things to us, but when we get to these places, which is so odd to think about, we might flourish and come in to the good life. And here at the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus is describing this upside-down kingdom. And if we're honest, we're confused by it, and no doubt his listeners were as well. We've covered already, blessed are those who are poor in spirit. Blessed are those who are mourning is another one. These are postures that would lead to flourishing. That's just really odd for us. Maybe the scriptures say you are blessed or in a posture of flourishing when you are poor in spirit. In other words, you know your need for God. You know that you can't do all of this on your own, and that's when you begin to flourish. Because any of us who have tried to live our lives by ourselves or apart from God, apart from the Christian community, we recognize how faulty it is. We're blessed, we're flourishing when we realize, oh, I cannot, but he can, and we can together. Or maybe you're in a posture of flourishing when you are mourning. And that's odd for us. We don't like pain in our culture. We don't like mourning. We don't even like actual funerals. We call them memorials now. We just want to celebrate life. Don't be sad at all for me, people say when they're about ready to die. I don't know. Maybe Jesus is onto something here, that when we mourn the things that need to be mourned, when we grieve the things that need to be grieved. I did a funeral this last Friday, and the family we're at the graveside, and the family is in the front, and they are weeping. There's hope for eternity, but they're weeping because something is off. Maybe we are in a flourishing place when we allow that kind of pain, when we grieve the right things, when we recognize this is not how God created the world to be. And therefore, we can begin to think of actually hoping that God, who's come to us, would rescue the world from the kingdom of darkness and death. So we actually are flourishing when we wrestle with that and allow it to be so. Verse 5, blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. These words, meek, gentle, humble, content. I want to juxtapose this idea with two stories, one very brief and one that I'll unpack as we go through our 4 words. The brief story. This is told to me by my friend Rick, who's a Foursquare pastor on the West Coast. And when he was in 20s and coming out of Bible college, he was also a personal investment banker working for a bank. And he's in California in the Malibu area, so he's working with very wealthy individuals. And he's seeing the vision of this world play out in people's lives. And he told me about this one client, that had lots of money, successful businessman, had the freedom and luxury to have all the toys that he wanted, all the autonomy that he wanted, travel wherever he wanted, just money coming out of his ears, and he would help him to invest that and organize it, and they developed this relationship over time. They had enough relationship that one day the man came in and said, I need you to help me to prepare for a divorce with all his money. He's like, whoa, a divorce? I'm sorry. Rick told me, he goes, his wife was beautiful. They had wonderful kids. He had no idea. He said, well, why are you getting a divorce? He asked. And the man said, my wife has cancer, and I don't have time for that. Now, the murmur goes through the crowd because we know that's off. That's wrong. There's something unjust. You're just living for yourself and the money and your freedom and your autonomy, and just so that you can get your way. That's so wrong. But I would ask, where is it in your life where you're not willing to give over for the sake of another? You see, the vision of the kingdom of the world is so strong that each of us are subject to it even as we're able to critique the very stark example with our gasps. We too ourselves need to hear again the vision of Jesus, which is so upside down. I want to tell you, in order to illustrate the story of my good friend, Dr. Jim Sarayakoff. We lived on the West Coast in Oregon until this last year, and Jim became close with us in a city called Hillsboro, Oregon, just outside of Portland. I met him in 2005 or 6, and in 2007 and 2008, we started to spend time together. And he said, Isaac, this is how he talked. I want you to meet me at Nellie's. Where's Nellie's? Well, you call it Starbucks, but that's too corporate for me. I want you to meet me at Nellie's, and we'd have coffee together. And he would say, Isaac, just look out there. The kingdom, Isaac, is there. It's right here among us. And he was a doctor, and he was a doctor that was at a place in life where, he had resource and money, but he goes, Isaac, this is my parish, these neighborhoods that were around his doctor's office. And these are the people that God has asked me to care for. So they come in, and I care for the people of my parish. And he just resisted all of the administrative, bureaucratic pressure to remain a family practice doctor who would walk with people, not just in a specialization, but walk with them their whole lives and their whole health journey. That's what he felt called to do. So you could see that I, as a young man, thought, oh, this man has something special to teach me. He's my parents' age, but we developed a friendship. I'll tell you about Jim as we unpack our 4 words. The first point, humble. Humility is rearranging life to accommodate others. Paul picks up on this. He's about ready to launch into this hymn famously describing who Jesus was, that he came and he gave up his rights to serve, and he's saying we ought to be doing the same thing. He says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. Now, you've heard ideas of, and you would recognize, like, we should not be self-centered. We should not be living for ourselves, even though the state of Pennsylvania, that's their whole vision. Pursue your happiness. You and Maryland probably have it better than we do in Pennsylvania. But you know that idea, and you know that we shouldn't be selfish. You parents have told your kids at some point, stop being selfish. And in doing so, you might not recognize that you are very selfish, even in your command not to be selfish, because actually it's their selfishness which is creating conflict, which you don't want conflict in the house. So selfishly, you tell them, stop being selfish. We all know that this is very difficult. My friend, Dr. Jim Sarayakoff, showed me what it means to really live for others. He discovered this way, Jesus' vision in this way. So in 2009, I was a pastor on staff at a church, and we were going through a pastoral change, which happened to coincide with the lease in the house that we were renting ending, and we needed to move out somewhere. So I don't know if I'm going to have a job in a couple of minutes or a couple of months, and I also don't know if I am going to have a place to live. And me and my wife and our 2 kids didn't really know what to do. And down at Nellie's, Dr. Jim Sarayakoff said, oh, Isaac, Shelly and I have been talking. Why don't you come and move into our house? Spend the summer there. And I said, well, that's very kind. He says, Isaac, he goes, let me tell you, you're not going to move into our house as a guest, because that was too much. Nobody can be a guest. Nobody can be a host for that long. Rather, Shelly and I have decided to give our house back to the Lord. And we're wondering if you would like to come back and live in that house that God has given to all of us on Jackson School Village Street. And he said, no, Isaac, we're taking down our decorations, and we want to see your decorations in the house that God has given to all of us. We'd actually like to use your furniture if that would be okay. Anyway, he had this vision. He recognized that he was at a stage in life in which he could He could live isolated, away from anyone else. He doesn't need anyone else. He has enough money and resources. His kids were out of the house. They could just live alone. But he saw that my life is not about me and just what I want. It's about others, and he was willing to audaciously invite us in. And so we moved in, and we lived with them for 4.5 months, and we called it the summer of magic at the end, because all of us having to give up our personal rights and to live communally, which is less common within our culture, and to figure out how that is, and for them to give up their own home. And at the end of 4.5 months, we all marveled on the magic we experienced, because we were experiencing this vision of the kingdom of God. Blessed are those who are humble, rearranging life to accommodate others. During that summer, Jim told us about the dream that he had to be a missionary doctor in the African country of Malawi, and they would go back for years, for 3 months at a time, and he wanted to move permanently. And he petitioned his wife for that to happen. She finally said, "No, Jim, I don't want to do that." And he had to give up his dream to achieve the first dream of his heart, his marriage to his wife. And he humbled himself and submitted himself, even not being able to achieve the deepest desire of his heart, to serve the people of Malawi. True humility means putting the needs of others before our own. It's about giving up our rights. Jim was flying upside down relative to how we see the world going and what the vision of the world is. The second word, gentle. The NASB said gentle. Gentleness is learning. It could be many things. Gentleness is learning new things to serve others. Proverbs 9:9. Instruct the wise, and they will be wiser still. Teach the righteous, and they will add to their learning. The idea that we all have something to learn. Gentleness is allowing God's Spirit to make us malleable, to be able to change and adjust, to learn new things and new skills, and so into whichever context we are called into. Colossians 3:24-25. Paul says, "Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for human masters, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ you are serving." This is the vision, that we learn new things, that gentleness, that we will be blessed, we will flourish even in this posture. Paul says in 1 Corinthians, he's reflecting on his life, he says, "To the weak I became weak to win the weak. I have become all things to all people, so that by all possible means I might save some." Being able to adjust, to be malleable. Gentleness allows the Spirit to bring us into the seasons to adjust so that we can accomplish what his work is and live up to the vision of flourishing that he has for us. So you need to know about Dr. Jim. You may suspect already, he was anti-technology. You know, he would walk 1.5 miles to his office, and he would walk slowly with his arms behind his back, and he would say things like this: "Isaac, when you drive a car, you don't see people, you just see roads, and you only see yourself and where you need to go. But when you walk on the side of the road, you see the people, and I see the people of my parish." He understood that technology can have an effect on us. But he was willing to even adjust himself to learn something new to serve others. You see, his wife developed Alzheimer's. Shelley, who is sweet and is kind, sharp as a tack, quiet, subtle, witty humor that you just barely hear as she passes by, one of these types. He gave himself up for her. As her diagnosis came back through that her memory was slipping, he recognized that the technology of an iPhone for her and for him might be very helpful to keep track of things. And so he learned how to use the iPhone. He taught her how to use the iPhone to keep track of appointments and calendars, how to use the Notes app to write down important things as they happen, to write down where she put something so that when she went back to look for it, her memory was slipping. She wouldn't know where she put something, but maybe if she would remember to look at her Notes app, she would be able to recall where she was putting something. He adjusted their life. He began to serve her. He began to learn new things. He recognized that she needed to work on her memory. And rather than just saying, "Shelley, let's work on your memory now," he got a box of Scrabble letters. And in the Scrabble letters, they assigned a name of a person that they knew that they were dedicated to pray for. And each night, they would take out one of the letters and they would ask, who is this? And she would remember somebody that was important to them, bring it to mind and pray for them. And I'm really glad to report to you guys that the letter I was for Isaac. They were praying for me. You see, gentleness is not weakness, but it's strength under control. It's about being willing to learn and adapt to better serve others, to be able to be malleable, to allow Jesus to guide us. Even for Jim to be guided away from his very understandable and good and righteous critique of how technology might be shifting and shaping our lives in a negative way. So I give that over to serve. The third, that word meekness. Meekness is, one way to describe it, slowing down to serve others. Now you need to know that Dr. Jim Saryakov is strong, he's determined, he's a man who sets a course, he sees where someone needs to go and he can backfill with all the tasks that need to be done. He's a great leader. I can imagine as a young man that he was impatient. I can imagine as a young man that he knew where he was going, needed to get there, and maybe he stepped over and through people to get there. He's that kind of strong-minded individual. But he had allowed the vision of Jesus to shape his heart. He had allowed even these words like the Beatitudes or ideas of meekness to shape how he lived his life. James says, my dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. I guess, actually I probably know, that the pace of the kingdom of God is much slower than the pace of our Western culture. Do you agree with that? Yeah, you should. Yes. Likely we are getting ahead. Likely we have ideas about the way the world should be. Likely the patterns of our world, the rhythms of the world, take us beyond where God is at. Likely that is very true. Meekness is being able to slow down and serve according to what God is doing. Isaiah cast this vision, the prophet Isaiah. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. There's something about slowing down and trusting our whole lives to God in which He can begin to show us the vision that leads us towards a stability and an ability to be able to serve others. And I saw this with Dr. Jim when our Alzheimer's diagnosis came and the descent into rehabilitation. Being debilitated was slow and it happened over a course of years. And he knew that getting her out walking would be helpful for her. And they loved England together. They've been to England several times. And they had this vision of walking across England. And there's this trail that you can walk through England. And so he developed a training regimen. And he and Shelley would walk through the streets of Hillsborough 5 to 10 miles in the morning to train for this long hike across England. And then they accomplished that because Jim was slowing down to be able to serve his wife. Just 2 years ago, in July of 2022, they hiked the Swiss Alps together. And at this point, Shelley's body was beginning to gnarl and begin to really shift. And so the walk was like shuffle, shuffle, step. But he said, Isaac, I always believed in Shelley. I was never going to let the illness dictate if I believed in her or not. And it was my job to help her with that journey. He used his strength to serve, and serving slowed him down, and he embodied what meekness looks like. It is not the absence of strength, but is using one's strength to serve slowly. She loved the pool. They loved going to the pool together, and in the last years of her life, he told me how Alzheimer's begins to affect the brain and it misfires towards the flexor muscles often. And so the muscles are told to overflex, which is why she was hunched and bent over, totally bent over at a 90-degree angle in her wheelchair because her muscles were pulling her this way. And he said, but she loved the pool, so I would take her to the pool. And as she came down into the pool, hunched over, he said, I would have to get down in the pool. She would come down the steps, and he goes, and then Isaac, I would exert about 30 pounds of pressure on her forehead, and then I'd pull her waist, and I would be able to keep her head out of the water, and we would dance through the water. And I would whisper poetry to her that we memorized, and I would sing the songs of love and the old hymns that nobody sings anymore, Isaac. That's what he would say. And he slowed down to serve. But do you note 30 pounds of pressure, the strength that it takes to be meek? Picture of strength that exerts itself for the sake of love. You see, meekness involves slowing down and using our strength to serve others, not for self-promotion, but for the benefit of another. Jim's commitment to slowing down, accepting what this life was for him, and even recognizing that there could be flourishing. He said, Isaac, me and Shelley were closer than ever through this illness. And it seems like it would be the opposite once you weren't able to do what you wanted to do. And that brings me to the final point. The fourth idea, Eugene Peterson uses that word contentment. Dr. Jim learned the secret that Paul talks about of being content in all situations. I tell you, if there's one thing that I think that for Christians, what can steal our legacy would be discontentment. Because once we are in a posture or a pattern or a mindset of discontentment, where we think life ought to be giving us something that it isn't right now, to where we think that God ought to be doing something that he isn't right now, then once we're in that posture of discontentment, then we are ripe for the enemy to be able to sow lies. The soil of our heart gets cultivated in such a way that we are ready for the lies of the enemy to drop down. And the lies of the enemy, maybe God doesn't really love you. You don't deserve this to have happen. Or the lies of comparison. My life is not like so-and-so's, and that's not fair. You see, if we cultivate discontentment, our legacy will be stolen. And the scriptures are full of invitations for us to reflect on God's goodness in the past, to ruminate on God's goodness in the future, so that in the present we are secured and stable and in contentment, trusting that God is the one that is orchestrating the reconciliation of all things. Hebrews picks up on this, the writer of Hebrews. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and the perfecter of our faith. Seeing with our eyes Jesus down, that's where we're going. He's the one that is renewing all things. Paul picks up on this on the end of his life. He's reflecting to his young protege, Timothy, and he says to Timothy, I have fought the good fight. He's looking back. I have finished the race. He's saying, I have finished it. I have kept the faith. And then he's looking to the future. Now there is in store for me, the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day. And then he turns to us and he says, and not only to me, but also to all who have longed for his appearing. You see, contentment is leaving a legacy to help others to find their way home. St. Augustine says our hearts are aching in a hole until we find our home again in God. And that is true for you, and that is true for every person. And it is us coming into the place of contentment, which is an aspect of this meekness and this humility, and which it's evidence to those around us that we are at home with God, no matter what happens. So in the last few years of Shelley's life, he said, it became tough, Isaac, because, we would walk to the office in the morning, but then she would be at the office for half the day. but then she wouldn't be able to find her way home. And he said he always believed in her. He believed in her more than what you or I would think would be safe. And so he put directions like on her iPhone to follow her way home. But he says she would leave her iPhone in a different cardigan or sweater or jacket, so that didn't work. And so he goes, so this is what I did, Isaac. He goes, you know that temporary spray paint? I was like, I don't know, that temporary spray paint? No, that they mark the roads with. I said, yeah. He goes, so I would go in the morning with Shelly. And on the way to the office, I would just make arrows that go back that way to home, Shell. You'll see these lines. These arrows will take you back home. And a little further, this is the turn. Now, Shelly, see these arrows. Just follow, you'll get back home. Because he wanted her to have the dignity of being able to find her way back home. And I was thinking about our lives and you and I, and how it can steal our ability to point people back to what our home is in God? Discontentment, in which we are always looking for something else. All the arrows of our life that we're pointing is to something else, and what's about me, and what is in my future, and what is God doing with me, and me. And God is saying, no, it's in this place of contentment that you can point back to where your home is with God. And anybody that ever asks you, why are you content and secure and hopeful as you walk through life? And you can say, oh, just follow these arrows. I found my home in God, and Jesus has cast this vision for me in which I'm walking in contentment. And I'm secure. Meekness means posturing ourselves in such a way that we will help others get safely home. So as we go back through each of these big ideas, maybe take a picture of the screen to just, if there's a particular point that you thought might be helpful for you to ruminate on or to reflect on this week, please do so. The first thing we talked about was humility, or being humble. Blessed are those who are humble, humbly rearranging life to accommodate others. The question for you, where can you humbly make room for someone else's needs this week? The second idea, that blessed are those who are gentle, gently learning new things to serve others. The question prompt for you, what new skill or attitude can you gently embrace to better serve others? Maybe for you parents, there's a new technique within parenting. There's a new point of view within parenting. There's a transition in your parenting journey in which something new needs to be embraced rather than rejected so you can better serve your kids. The word meekness, meekly slowing down to serve others. The prompt for you, how can you slow down and use your strength to serve someone today? And finally, contentment. Blessed are those who are content, accepting who they are, contentedly leaving a legacy to help others find their way home. The question, what small act can you do this week to leave a lasting impact on someone else? Jesus is inviting us into the vision of his kingdom in which we will flourish. Jesus says in John 10 that I have come that you might have life and have it in the full. So even to the very end, Shelley passed away this year, January 27th, and through the very end, as Jim had this vision, he's actually living a flourishing life. We visited him, the picture up here on the screen. Donnie and I visited him while we were on vacation back in Oregon, and we got to remember and reflect on and recall the life of Shelley together. He is in deep mourning right now because of his deep love for his wife that he served and loved so very well. But even in that deep mourning, there's something of richness and vitality and love and connection and depth that suggests that Jim has indeed gone after the vision of the kingdom of God. And so back when we were in Hillsborough, we were at their house and we took the 2-mile walk with him, a sojourn. We picked up some flowers from a neighbor to take to Shelley's gravesite. And as we passed through Hillsborough, Jim reflected on his memories. We reflected on some of ours together and how our lives had joined together for that season. Then as we came to the graveside, the stone isn't there yet. It's just a simple marker in the ground. And we sat, and Dr. Jim Sariakov, he talked to Shelley right there. He said, "Shell, we got some great guests for you today." And then we talked with Shelley, and we had a moment of just remembering, and we laughed, and we cried, and we reflected, and then Jim let us know that one of Shelley's favorite songs was the hymn, "It Is Well." And so we sang "It Is Well," and then we got up and departed, and we sang the second verse and the third verse as we walked off the site. And I thought, for those of us who grasp the vision of Jesus' kingdom, it will always be well with our soul. Because the vision of the kingdom of the world is contingent upon everything going right for you or for me. But Jesus' kingdom, which he says will never, ever end, which he said is right here among you, his way can be experienced to anyone as we take on these postures. Oh, we're blessed when we're poor in spirit. We're blessed when we're mourning. We're blessed when we're meek, we're gentle, we're humble. We're blessed when we're in a posture of contentment. We are even blessed when we're persecuted for Jesus' name's sake, as he concludes this little section in a few verses. His kingdom will always reap a fruit if we will allow it and take on his will and his way. Let me pray for you. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, we are deeply grateful that among us you are ministering and reminding us that the ways of this world will fall and falter and fail in our own lives. Lord, but your kingdom will never end and your way will never disappoint. So draw us deeply by your Spirit into your way, into your will. And I pray a blessing on every person that is experiencing the challenges of life, the difficulty of life. Lord, they're experiencing having to go deeper into humility or gentleness or meekness or contentment. Lord, would you equip them and would you remind them that you will not disappoint them, for you will always be with us. You will never leave or abandon us, but you will consistently call us to your will and your way. We bless your name in Jesus' name. Amen.
Yeah, let's thank Pastor Isaac. Are you hungry to live in this way? To embrace the slowed down pace of walking in Jesus' footsteps and ministering to others in the way that he did. I just want to exhort us as a community to receive this. I've often heard from a mentor in my life that the greatest sermon, and that was a great sermon, is only as good as it is lived out in the day-to-day that comes afterwards. So I want to encourage you, what out of that you heard today do you need to begin to integrate into your life? Whether it's the slowing down and saying, Lord, even this week for me, I'm sure like many of you that are parents, getting ready for back to school, you almost feel you're getting swept away into the current that is coming. Whatever it is contextualized for your life, how can you begin to ground yourself and anchor yourself in the immovable power of God's love? And secondly, how can you practice gratitude? He talks so well about this expectation that culture puts on us to always look for the next thing or want more or not be satisfied. How can we find our home in Jesus this week? So I want to just invite you to stand, and I'm going to take a minute and just invite all of our ministry teams to come forward. If you felt moved today and you just need to receive prayer, we have folks that are up here that want to pray with you. Don't hurry off. Secondly, if today was your very first time being with us, we do want to give you a gift just for being with us. We ask that you stop by Guest Central right back here before you leave so that we can welcome you. And with that, I would just like to speak a blessing over you as you're dismissed. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you his peace. God bless you, dear folks. Walk with Jesus.